When most of us think about the Bible, we kind of picture a library, right? A big collection of different books, some history, some poetry, some letters. But what if that's not the right way to look at it at all? What if it's actually one single epic story with a clear beginning, a middle, and an end? Okay, let's dive into this.
So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to trace the massive story arc of the whole Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation and see how all these seemingly separate pieces actually lock together to tell one cohesive, incredible story. All right, every great story needs a beginning. And for this one, we're starting with Act 1, A Perfect World. This is where we see a perfect creation and pretty quickly the introduction of a central conflict that, changes everything. It all kicks off with God. In just 6 days, through a series of powerful commands, God literally speaks the universe into being. We get light, the sky, the land, stars, each day adding another layer of incredible beauty and order. But that 6th day, whoa, that one was something special. Because on day 6, God creates humanity. You've got Adam and Eve. And here's the key, unlike everything else he made, they are created in God's own image. They're designed to live in this perfect garden, Eden, and walk and talk directly with their creator. It's paradise. But this perfect world had just one rule. Real simple. Don't eat the fruit from one specific tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But then a serpent enters the picture and tempts them, planting a seed of doubt, promising that if they just ate the fruit, they'd be like gods themselves. And they ate. In that single moment of disobedience, everything shattered. Innocence was gone. For the very first time, shame and death entered the world. They were kicked out of the garden. And worse, they were now separated from God. And right there, that's the core problem, this central conflict that the rest of this entire epic story is going to try and solve. So what happens now? Is the world just broken? Well, this brings us to Act 2. See, God doesn't just give up on humanity. Instead, he kicks off this long, detailed rescue plan, and it all starts with just one man and his family. God calls this one guy, Abram, we know him better as Abraham, and makes this absolutely massive promise. He tells him, I'm gonna make your descendants into a great nation, give them a land of their own, and through you, I'm going to bless the entire world. This is the seed, the very beginning of the nation of Israel. But this promise, it doesn't happen overnight, not even close. Abram's family grows and grows, but generations later, they end up as slaves in Egypt. For 400 long, brutal years, they suffer. But even in that suffering, they grow into a nation of millions, which sets the stage for a seriously dramatic rescue. And then, wow, we get one of the most epic rescue missions in history. Through a leader named Moses, God sends 10 devastating plagues down on Egypt, saves his people through the blood of a lamb, and then parts the Red Sea for them to escape. Once they're free, they gather at Mount Sinai, where God gives them his law. Yep, the 10 Commandments are in there, and makes a formal covenant, a binding agreement to make them his chosen holy nation. Okay, so after 40 years of wandering in the desert, they finally make it to the promised land. Eventually, they ask for a king, just like the other nations around them. This ushers in a golden age, especially under King David, a man described as being after God's own heart, and then his son, Solomon, who builds this magnificent temple in Jerusalem, a physical place for God's presence to dwell. But here we go again. It's like history repeating itself, right? Just like the first humans back in the garden, the kingdom's faithfulness just doesn't last. This brings us to Act 3, which is really the story's devastating low point, where the consequences of walking away from God become painfully real. So after Solomon, that golden age, it starts to tarnish fast. His son makes a really bad call, and the nation just rips apart into 2 separate kingdoms. And the tragedy is this repeating pattern of disobedience. The northern kingdom, Israel, goes through 19 evil kings, totally turns its back on God, and gets wiped out by Assyria. The southern kingdom, Judah, has a few good kings, but ultimately follows the same path, and it's conquered by Babylon. Just imagine this. The temple is gone, Jerusalem is a pile of rubble, and the people are dragged off as exiles to live in Babylon. The promise seems totally broken. They've lost everything, their land, their king, their temple. This verse from the Psalms just perfectly captures that feeling of complete and utter despair. But even in this total darkness, there's a glimmer of hope. God sends prophets, like Ezekiel, who say, yes,
This exile is a judgment for your actions, but it is not the end of the story. They start talking about a future restoration, a new king, and a new kind of covenant, one that wouldn't be written on stone tablets, but will be written directly on people's hearts. And all of this, the despair, the prophecies, the hope, it all leads us to the climax of the entire epic, Act 4. This is where all the promises, all the patterns, all the hopes from the story so far come together and focus on one single person. Okay, fast forward about 400 years. It's been quiet, no prophets, nothing. And then a baby is born in Bethlehem. He's a direct descendant of Abraham and King David. His name is Jesus. An angel had announced that he would be the Son of the Most High and that his kingdom would last forever. And his public life? It was just incredible. The things he did confirmed all these claims. He performed amazing miracles, healing people who were sick, feeding thousands with just a few loaves of bread, even controlling the weather. These weren't just magic tricks, they were signs, little previews of God's kingdom breaking back into our broken world, showing us how things were always supposed to be. But the story takes a sharp turn here. Instead of being crowned king, Jesus is rejected, arrested, and crucified. And yet, his death wasn't a failure or a tragic mistake. The story presents it as the ultimate sacrifice, the one act powerful enough to finally and fully solve that problem of sin and separation from God that started all the way back in the garden. So his body is laid in a tomb. It's sealed with a massive stone. Guards are posted outside. It really looks like it's all over. But the most important event of the entire epic was about to happen. Because 3 days later, that tomb was empty. Jesus had risen from the dead, conquering sin and death for good. The resurrection was the ultimate exclamation point, the final proof that everything he said was true. And it opened up the way for anyone at all, to have that restored relationship with God, to get that new heart and new spirit that the prophets had promised so long ago. So there it is, the single epic story of the Bible, a narrative that moves from a perfect garden to a tragic fall through a long and messy rescue mission, all culminating in an ultimate, breathtaking redemption. It claims to be not just a story, but the true story of our world. And that leaves all of us with a final, really big question. What does this epic story mean for us today?